And thank you, Administrator, again. Connecticut, as you know exceptionally well, has been the beneficiary of substantial improvements to health through the Clean Air Act. And so I would like you to talk a little bit about the situation now. Many utilities have already installed pollution control devices on their facilities. If EPA at this time were to pull back on clean air regulations governing these utilities, would they have, do you believe they'd have an incentive to run these pollution control devices? And what would be the associated impact on air quality and public health, particularly for those of us, I have to say, on the eastern seaboard who, with west to east winds, are the recipient of what is burned in Indiana, Ohio, and elsewhere?
Well, we know even with the control equipment working that the power sector remains the largest single stationary source sector in terms of the amount of pollution that it emits. We have been working hard with them, but there is no question that there is financial incentive to bypass equipment when it's available to be done. So I would assume that if we were to pull back on our regulations, what you're going to see is increased emission. And that increased emission results directly in public health impacts that are as severe as thousands of premature deaths.
I know in our own state we've seen those asthma rates rise very substantially in our cities, and those are costs that are borne primarily by state governments, who then have to pick up the tab, and by insurance companies too.
And many because of pollution that comes to you from facilities run very far away.
Exactly. If we could turn for a moment to the scientific review process. Certainly we've heard some commentary today and elsewhere from members of Congress who have stated that, or suggested that EPA develops regulations based on faulty scientific evidence. Can you explain to us in a little more detail, and I'll ask my question then listen, how the scientific process that underpins EPA regulations is peer-reviewed, what you believe to be the importance of the peer-review process, and flesh that out a little bit more for us, please.
Yeah, the process that we use is to actually establish peer review panels. We can do them by seeking advice from the National Academies of Sciences. We can establish it through our Science Advisory Board, and we can use consultants that follow similar processes and establish, again, transparent, robust, balanced peer review. The Science Advisory Board is a highly transparent professional entity where as a FACA, we comply with those regulations. We also comply with ethics requirements. We follow all of the guidance that's given to us in the directives by the Office of Management and Budget and how to do our work. I believe that we are a model for transparent, solid, high-quality science. If the Clean Air Act Science Advisory Committee was mentioned, that advisory committee was just recently looked at by our own IG, our Office of Inspector General, who just issued a report commending us for how solid our panel was and our ability to have that balanced and appropriate. Now, we're always working to enhance that, but I'm incredibly proud of the science this agency relies on, and I know the high quality of our science is what is going to keep EPA relevant and make us and allow us to do the right thing in terms of meeting our mission, which is public health protection.
And if I may, I'm shuttling between hearings, and currently in the Transportation and Infrastructure hearing, we are talking about the costs of Sandy and the underwater rail lines in the state of Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, the impacts of these severe weather systems that we see. Can you talk a little bit about how in EPA, other than the curbing of greenhouse gas emissions, what other work is EPA doing to look at the scientific, but also the very real economic impacts, I have to say, on the eastern seaboard we're seeing from climate change and severe weather conditions?
Congresswoman, in 2012, the costs associated with disaster response topped $120 billion. That's not planned expenses. That's what happens. And what we know is that in the face of a changing climate, these types of disasters are going to become more and more prevalent if we don't reduce greenhouse gases. If you look at the work of this agency, we have not only been funding efforts at the local level and the state level to look at how you can adapt to a changing climate. We've put out a plan that requires and shows a pathway forward for EPA to look at how it does its business working with the communities. So we look at a changing climate, and we factor that into our decision-making and our ability to work more carefully and collaboratively with local communities and states moving forward. And my heart goes out to Connecticut. I know it was very hard hit, and it is my home away from home.
Thank you for your service, and I yield back.
Okay.